It's almost as if there's a coin slot on your hip and you're pulling that elbow through the coin slot. So I know this is a odd, funny angle, pushing our knees out and kind of moving the ground out away from us. So it'll look like this, boom, boom. This little area, right? So that's why I'm really good at this dance move. What is going on, everyone? Welcome back to another Workout Wednesday. If you were following me on Instagram back in the day, probably 2.5 years ago, you'll probably recognize exactly where I'm at. I'm back where it all literally started. And today, I want to kind of bring a physical aspect to a podcast I did a couple weeks ago, talking about the 7 functional movement patterns that you should incorporate in any kind of functional program. If you're trying to program for yourself, if you are writing a program for someone, which hopefully you're not if you're not a personal trainer, but anything that will kind of make sense in that podcast, I'm gonna put in over here physically so you can match up the movements and the words physically. Lots of physicals there. So again, to hit on what that podcast was on, we went through all the functional movement patterns, my philosophy on how to program for your specific goals, whether that's the most effective kind of cardio, all the different kind of cardio and how they target different energy systems, how you should program, my recommendation on how many times a week per everything. It's all in that podcast. So I'll put that at the end of the video. It'll link to a recommended video. I will put that there for you to listen to. And before we get going into the 7 functional movement patterns, which today I'm just gonna show you, I'm gonna explain each one and kind of put a name to a movement, 2 movements rather, per functional movement pattern so that you can program functionally. I am talking a lot, so before we get going, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you're the first one to see my videos. Let's get into some functional moves and have a little fun. Well, I was just thinking I should probably tell you what the functional movement patterns are if you haven't seen that podcast. So we've got knee dominant, we've got hip dominant, we've got horizontal push, horizontal pull, vertical push, vertical pull, and core. And I always say core is the best when you're using unilateral movements because you can engage the core. If I'm doing a single arm row, I can engage the core. So we'll get to those in something a little bit more in depth at the end for the core. But for now, let's start with knee dominant. We'll start with the 2 ones that I'll recommend, the 2 movements that I'll recommend. I'm gonna walk you through it, kind of how to do them and what you should be focusing on through those movement patterns. First movement pattern is gonna be the knee dominant movement pattern. So we're gonna go through a squat and a reverse lunge here. So a lot of people will say the squat could be also hip hinge because you start with your hips. In a good squat, you want to always think about squeezing this core first. So boom, right there, you're squeezing the buttocks. You're gonna engage that core, then you're gonna push those hips back to start. Now, we're gonna be bending at the knees, so I like the philosophy that it's knee dominant. So again, we're gonna push the hips back, we're gonna keep that chest up, and we're gonna push our hips back and down, coming down to that nice parallel movement, or parallel to the ground if you can go that far. Now, on the way back up, I want you to think about pushing your knees out. If your knees buckle in, no bueno. We're pushing our knees out and kind of moving the ground out away from us. So it'll look like this, boom, boom, right? So we're kind of taking from the inside of our feet to the outside of our feet. So in fast motion, I'm gonna do about 5 reps each here, just so you can see it and feel it. You wanna feel your hips go back, feel that weight in your heels, come down, push back up using your toes. Down, keeping that chest up, spine nice and straight, keeping everything aligned. So this is a bilateral knee dominant movement. Those, obviously you can go with a back squat with everything, or with the barbell on your back. You could pick up some dumbbells. You could go with a goblet squat right here. With a goblet squat, you could even go with a front rack front squat. So right here with dumbbells, kettlebells, whatever you need. This one's a little bit harder. We're talking about progression here, engaging your core a little bit more. So I have these dumbbells out just for examples. So let's get into a reverse lunge. So with our reverse lunge, I want you to just think about the most comfortable step back. So it's not right here, you're gonna be too narrow. It's not way here because now you're all off balance. So just a nice comfortable step back, and you're gonna come down. I'm gonna go to the ground for a second. When you're there in that position, you should almost have everything in a 90-degree angle. So knees at 90 degrees, ankles at 90 degrees, knees, ankles, everything, right? So I'm here, everything's kind of parallel, and I'm coming back, pushing up through that front heel to the toe. Boom. You're gonna feel your quad squeeze at the front. You're gonna feel your bum and your glute at the back stretch, come through. And we'll alternate, reach, come through. Reach, get into that big toe in the back, come through. Again, big toe, up into the front. So with dumbbells, obviously you would just be holding these on the side. You could go back, back. You could have just one side where you go with the same side, and that's actually gonna help stabilize your core. If you want, go a fist, but I'm just giving you options so you can see these. Obviously, you can kind of use context clues with any of these movements, and what you feel might be the most kind of like, we think of a chest day. Well, that's a lot of horizontal push, but we'll get there. So movement pattern number 2 is the hip hinge. In my opinion, this is the most important fundamental functional movement pattern because it's working the posterior chain. What's the posterior chain? It is your back side of your body. So that's anything from your calves, hamstrings, glutes, lower back, upper back, right? Everything that we need to keep our back side of our body tight so that we have a good posture, right? So think about the more that we work these muscles in the back, the more it pulls them together and you're able to have that posture, right? So the hip hinge position, the best one that I love is an RDL. It's really gonna work your glutes as well. So you're gonna have a slight bend in the knees. You're going to push the hips back. And as the hips come back, you're keeping that chest over the toes. You're not coming too close, you're not coming too forward, you're not bending your knees with it. It's just a slight bend and they stay there. You're gonna come down all the way. I can probably go further than most because I do these all the time, but you're gonna go and you feel your hamstrings stretch. So I know this is a odd, funny angle, but you'll see my hamstrings engage when I come down, 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 down. I feel them, and then now I'm gonna pull up through my heels. So if I had something in my hands, I would come right here. And right there, I squeeze the glutes nice and firm to activate the glutes and the hamstrings. If I was doing those with dumbbells or a barbell, this is where it gets a little bit trickier. I want you to think about always keeping that weight as close to your body as possible. Now, another aspect of the RDL is pulling your shoulders back and down. So again, that's gonna allow for that posture. You're gonna come down and you're gonna go as far as you can without breaking that posture. So now I'm down here, they're nice and close. I can feel my posture starting to slip. My hamstrings are engaged and I'm gonna pull through nice and tight, right? So everything's still locked in that position. I'm gonna do about 5 and we'll move on. If you'll notice as well, when I come to the top, that core is engaged. You can make anything a core movement, and I stand by that until I go to my grave. Another great hip hinge is anything that has to do, and this is probably the most regressed form, anything being on your back with this supine hip bridge. So without any weight, just pull those heels to the ground, back down, and you're gonna literally just thrust into the air. I know it's hilarious, but hey, we got to do these things. Talk about functional movements. Here we go. So pushing up through the heels, you're gonna squeeze, feel those glutes squeeze, feel the lower back squeeze. If you do these and you're sore through your lower back, that's normal. It's because you probably aren't used to doing those. And if you are, well, I'm not even gonna go there. And we'll pull the hips back down, push through, squeeze. If you want, you can have a barbell here. A lot of people like to do it with a bench, hold their shoulder blades on the bench, allow for that more range of motion, but this is the most regressed form of the hip hinge if you're a beginner, and even if you just want to activate those glutes for any kind of workout. Functional pattern number 3, we're gonna get into the upper body here. So it is just a horizontal push. Now with the horizontal push, that's any kind of press movement that you think of for chest. We'll get into a vertical push, which is anything you think of with shoulders. But with that said, we won't go too crazy in depth. What I really want you to think about here, 2 movements, 2 examples would be any kind of, you know, a push-up or a bench press or decline press, any kind of pressing motion. But what I want you to really take away from on these presses is the straighter your hands are, the more pressure you're going to put on your shoulder joint. So a lot of people will feel when they're doing a bench press, and I'm just going to use a floor press for example because obviously I don't have a bench out here, but a lot of times will keep their hands really narrow and they'll keep their palms almost facing away from them. So they'll push up and it just stays right in here and it gets really hard and really weird for their chest. What I want you to think about is opening those palms at about a 45-degree angle, then coming down. Now you feel the chest open up, especially if you don't have the ground locking you in, which this floor press is actually a really great exercise if you're a beginner and you don't want to mess up your shoulders. So you can try with this regressed form, but opening up those hands to about 45 degrees, then pushing, that allows for that opening of the chest and then a good contraction at the top. Boom. So again, opening from here in that narrow feeling to opening up, and you can actually feel your shoulder girdle open up a little. So that's really, really big takeaway to protect your shoulders. So the next takeaway on that, we'll just set up a push-up. If I was to be pushing up just like this, it's really hard. Yes, I can engage my chest, but it's still putting a lot of pressure on my shoulders. If I open those up, 45-degree angle, now you can see my chest is completely open and ready for action. Boom. Down and through. Boom. Anything with a push-up variation, again, trying to squeeze that bum so you can really feel the core engage. One last thing, again, if you go all the way open, a lot of people like to do their dumbbell push-ups like this. Super safe. I get questions too about opening hands for push-ups versus going on your fists. If you don't like going on your hands and it hurts your wrist, going on your fist is just okay, or just as okay, in my opinion. Yeah, it's great. Now, next movement pattern is just gonna be a horizontal pull. So that's the opposite of the press. We're getting into the backside. Again, probably one of the most fundamental, functional, necessary movements. You're opening a car door. You're opening any kind, right? You're pulling. That is your posture as well. So any kind of horizontal row. That's number 4. Number four. So right here, I'm just going to demonstrate a bent over row. This is kind of advanced, but anything that you could do with a seated cable. Cables are great just to isolate these, but what I really want people to think about with rowing and a lat pull is this movement of locking your shoulders back before you do anything. If I'm just here and I just go all the way, right, like all craziness, I have a lot more room for error to mess up my shoulders. If I come down into this bent over row, kind of like my RDL position, and I pull my shoulders back, and then I pull with my actual back instead of my biceps, I'm gonna have a lot more engagement, right? So again, pulling that back there, now we're pulling. Boom, coming back to that same position. An exercise I'm gonna throw in, I can't really throw in a lot here with these, but I'm gonna go with something that I love, literally my favorite exercise for back and core. It's a high plank dumbbell row. So I'm gonna widen those feet, engage the core, and what you'll notice, I want you to notice where the row is. It's not straight up. Now we're working too much of our shoulder, our rear delt. I want you to notice that we're pulling to our hip pocket. So anytime you're doing a horizontal pull, really think about pulling to those hip pockets, almost as if there's a coin slot on your hip and you're pulling that elbow through the coin slot. So again, right here, Number 5, we're going into a vertical push. So that's any overhead press. That's a super fundamental, functional movement pattern. And at the very end, I'm gonna go through every compound, like the main exercise through, and I'll just tell you, but these are the ones that I personally enjoy. So again, anything that's a vertical push, if you're standing, really think about squeezing that core with the butt squeeze to keep that lower back safe, right? So we're just pushing up, and down. So I love a good Arnold press where you start with the dumbbells here facing you, and I'm gonna squeeze that core, and as I press up, I'm rotating out. So that's gonna hit just about every head of the shoulder. Rotating your functional fluid through that shoulder joint, the core is engaged. Standing is always gonna be great for the core. Now, another thing I think is essential with shoulders is isolating unilaterally. And in my opinion, the best way to do that is some kind of half kneeling stance. So I'll do that same exact exercise, except in a half kneeling stance. So that's just gonna be 90 degrees, 90 degrees. Push this hip through. Now you're engaging the core, right? So I'm gonna start here. You'll be able to see my core. As I rotate up, and then I come down, I'm controlling with this core down, right? So again, we're hitting that seventh functional movement pattern with the core through these unilateral exercises. Again, vertical press, not much more to understand. If you do feel shoulder problems, I would suggest doing some kind of internal or external rotation with cables or bands, which would just be anchoring a band over there, keeping that elbow to the side, pulling in, and then likewise, if it's over there, out. That's just for the stability muscles, but a lot of times those overhead movements can get tough for people injury-wise because it's not as used, and then when you're reaching something like the grocery store, you're like, oh crap, something happened to my shoulder, right? So we wanna make sure that those are taken care of through the longevity of life. Number 6, we've already done a vertical push, now it's vertical pull. Obviously, I don't have a lat pull down, I don't have anything to do a pull up here, but I'm just gonna demonstrate. I could do a crunch over, or a pull over crunch, and I'm not even gonna explain this, but just to show what it is. If you're at home and you want an ab exercise and a back/lat exercise, this is about the one I love the most. So 6 inches and you're pulling, right? So you feel that lat. This is really hard to talk and do at the same time. Extending, really advanced core move, as well as getting some lats in there. But the easiest way to target these vertical pulls is some kind of lat pull down. And when I say that, again, I want you to focus on these pulling movements because in my opinion, they're the most essential for our posture and for our overall longevity. With the lat pull, we're not just gonna keep going, right? Watch my lats. The lats are these muscles. When you go to grab the bar, you're gonna lock those scaps down. Your scaps are basically your shoulder blades, but into your rhomboids right here, and then your traps. So it's all that kind of this little area, right? So that's why I'm really good at this dance move. So again, we're gonna lock down, then we'll pull, and a lot of people like to pull down to their belly button when they should be pulling down to their nipples. And again, when you see people, I'm gonna use this kind of as a prop. If you're sitting, you see people on the lat pull down machine and they're pulling like this, right? That's not gonna do you as much good as it would if you lock these down and pull straight back, kind of come into those nipples, collarbone area, upper chest, lock down, boom, boom, boom. Super functional. Last but certainly not least, number 7, your core. It's probably, definitely not least, it's probably the most important because in the long run of life, we need our core to be stable and strong. So again, I've hit on the unilateral movements, I've hit on my favorite exercise, but when you break down core, yes, you can do the crunches, those are great. You're gonna get some kind of range of motion, but you know, there's different kinds of core. You can do an anti movements are my favorite kinds of movements. You have anti-lateral flexion, which is a lateral plank. So when you're doing a lateral plank, you'll have your elbows stacked under your shoulders. Shoulders are stacked, hips are stacked, knees are stacked, ankles are stacked. Everything's stacked. You can see the core engaged. It's my favorite anti-lateral flexion move. Now, the next one would be anti-extension, which is just gonna be a plank. So most bang for your buck, 2 exercises right there for your core. Anti-extension right here is your plank, keeping the elbows under the shoulders, keeping the toes grounded, keeping that core tight and those bum cheeks squeezed. And then the next part of an anti-movement would be an anti-rotation, so that would be something like the anti-rotation right here with the renegade row that I was doing. So again, people ask me all the time, like, hey, what core exercise should I do for my belly fat or my lower abs? Well, my answer to you is going to be incorporate all three of those that I just showed you and lots of rotation. And when I say rotation, I like anything with a cable that you can pull across, keeping the core tight. I love a good chop. So if I'm here, I'm following with if I'm in a half kneeling position, which is great for any kind of rotation, I'm just going to follow down, up, down, control up. But that's getting a little extreme. I would stick to those not easy, but easy to remember exercises like a lateral plank and a plank. They really are the most bang for your buck. And then any kind of rotational exercise. Yes, I like Russian twists, but I think they can really hurt somebody's lower back if you're not that experienced. So that is your core. Stick to the unilateral exercises. So before I wrap things up, I'm just gonna run through all 7 again and give you one exercise that is technically the compound movement. And when I say compound, that's just using your full body. Essentially, it's really using like a barbell or anything like a trap bar. So those are gonna be knee dominant, back squat, hip dominant, deadlift, horizontal push, bench press, horizontal pull, barbell row, vertical push, overhead press or military press with the barbell, vertical pull. Did I just say vertical pull? Maybe I said vertical push. It was supposed to be vertical push. Vertical pull, a pull-up, or lat pull-downs. Pull-up is the most compound. And then core, any kind of plank, that is gonna be core oriented. But if you're doing all of those exercises, chances are your core is probably engaged. Just remember the squeeze. So my friends, that is all I have for you today. I know it wasn't a real workout, quote unquote. You could take all of that if you wanted and listen to that podcast, go through the podcast and understand the reps and sets based on your specific goals. I talk about all of that in the podcast, and you could literally go through all those 7 movements that I just listed like 30 seconds ago and make a program of your own with that podcast supplemented with this episode of Workout Wednesdays or whatever day you're watching these videos. I almost said contents, but that would sound stupid. That is all I have for you, my friends. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did and you've got some kind of benefit, don't forget to share with your friends. Don't forget to like, don't forget to subscribe, and don't forget to hit the bell icon so you're the first one to see these videos when they come out. I will see you next time on a Sunday, on a vlog, or whatever video you venture to next. Go to the podcast. But either way, have an awesome freaking day, and don't forget to smile.